office hours. This is our US and EMEA instance that we have weekly. We have these office hour sessions every Wednesday from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time for those who are based in US and EMEA. And then we also have a monthly occurrence as well on the second Wednesday of each month for customers in our APAC time zone from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And so I'll link in chat a number of different links we'll be sharing today, but there is a link to the office hours if you're looking for the recording or being able to add the other calendar invites as well on your calendar. With that said, I just want to highlight a couple of new releases that we've had and some of those changes. In .NET, we now have out 1.21.1. And so there's just been a couple of updates in terms of a couple of bug fixes and other changes as well for unit testing, for the kernel JSON schema builder, and then also implementing generic data model structure for Azure Cosmos DB. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that latest release, we recommend that you do. And then I also want to highlight in Python, we've had some, since our last call, some new releases as well. There is a new release of 1.10.1 that has a couple of small changes as well, but we had 1.10 released last week as well. And so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, we highly recommend you dive into both of our new releases. In terms of documentation, I just want to kind of share some feedback with the community. We've been hearing your feedback around documentation, and we as a team have been going through and making updates. You'll see on the left-hand side in the screen capture that have gone through and restructured our table of concepts and how we're going through all the different concepts and areas. And then we've also introduced for different frameworks as well. We still have some updates that we're working through, and so we've gone through our first phase of restructuring. And we are doing some updates to content as well, but really appreciate everyone giving us feedback, and we're listening and getting that implemented in as well. So you'll be seeing some document updates in the coming weeks as well that I'll highlight and share with you. With that, I do want to highlight we have a number of new blogs out if you haven't had a chance to take a look. We'll dive in from two of our engineers around structured outputs, but it's both available in Python and .NET. And so we'll dive into a bit of an update from there, but also wanted to announce that Semantic Kernel Python, it's now reached 1 million downloads. And so we're really excited with that traction. And then also for those using Java, we have announced Java 1.3.0. And so if you haven't had a chance to read through the blog and all the updates that are within there, would recommend you take a chance to go through that as well. And then also just want to highlight that we have content in various languages that we're working on with Semantic Kernel. And so a little bit further back in the blog, if you go to the link that I had in chat, we have content in Spanish and going through some of our SLMs and a great walkthrough as well. And then there also is an upcoming event in Korean. And so we have a reminder out for that as well. And we'll upload the recording and link to that after as well. But just wanted to make sure if you do have individuals within your organizations or customers who are around the globe, we want to make sure that we have content that's meeting all of them as well. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dimitro and Evan to go through structured outputs. Over to the two of you.
I'll probably start. So actually, Svea, can I share my screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just let me know if you could see it.
I can see it now. Can others as well? Perfect. I see some thumbs up.
So I just want to highlight this blog post we released yesterday, which describes how to use structure outputs in .NET with OpenAI models. We also have the same material for the Python, and even may cover it later. But in terms of .NET, there's information about what models are supported for structure outputs, both in Azure OpenAI and OpenAI service providers. And then we have information with different approaches how to use structure outputs in Semantic Kernel. So the first option assumes that you're going to use OpenAI chat response format object, which basically means that you need to construct JSON schema by yourself, from JSON string. You basically specify all of the properties of your desired response format, and then you pass this object to OpenAI prompt execution settings, which comes from Semantic Kernel, and then you invoke a prompt with the settings, and so you are able to receive the response in the desired format, like for example in this output. And then there's also information how to use it with specific types. So for example, if you define this model, for example this class with all of the properties, you don't need to define all of the properties again here using JSON string. But instead of that, you can just take your response model and assign it directly to response format in OpenAI prompt execution settings. And in this case, JSON schema will be automatically generated for you by Semantic Kernel. And then you can basically invoke the prompt, deserialize the result, and then access each property separately, and then continue work with it. So you can get this kind of output. And there is also limitations listed because some of the features of JSON schema they are not supported yet in OpenAI structure outputs. For example, there's a format keyword which is used when we have properties like datetime offset, time span, URI, and so on. So those properties. So if you have a model which has one of the properties with those types, this JSON schema won't be accepted by OpenAI provider yet, but maybe in the future they will add support for it. So one of the workarounds for those properties will be to define them as strings and then perform the conversion on your side. And then also the other approach listed here is the structure output with function calling. So basically we can have some plugin which can return some data. Like in this case, we have a list of emails, and then I can define a response format type that as a response, I want an email with the body and then the category of it. So basically I'm asking AI model to categorize those emails in some way. And then I'm enabling function calling here. And then I'm also setting my response format as email result. And then I have a prompt as process the emails, but I don't specify in what way I want AI model to process them. I just say I just want them to be processed, but as a response, I want email body and then category. So then the model realizes that basically it needs to generate the category for each email, and then I can get an output that for each email body I can have some category. So yeah, I highly encourage you to check this blog post if you're interested in structure outputs specifically for the .NET, and then I guess Ivan can cover the Python side.
Perfect. We'll go to Evan, and then if there are any questions or feedback that folks have. Evan, do you want me to share out the slide from the structure output, or do you want to go through something else? Just let me know what you'd like me to share.
Yeah, I'll share my screen quickly.
Okay.
So we can just very similarly cover high level of this blog post that we have in Python as well. Put the link in chat. Python a little bit different from .NET, just given that we can utilize pydantic models. So the OpenAI SDK supports setting a pydantic model as the response format. You can also set a non-pydantic model if you choose to. We have a pydantic model here on screen, a step class and a reasoning class. Reasoning class would be what we give the model as the response format we want. Contains a list of steps and then the final answer. You can do this in a non-pydantic model if you don't want to deal with that. Just pydantic gives you the validation on the JSON schema, and so it's a nice thing to have if you want. As Dimitro pointed out, you can also pass in your own JSON schema if it's formatted properly. We'll do some validation on that to make sure that it is working, with as the model expects. Again, same thing in .NET. The models used for either Azure OpenAI or OpenAI are going to be the same. And then what we're doing in this blog post is just showing how to ask a simple math question, giving it a system message that's a math tutor to kind of keep it on those guidelines, and then walking through how can I solve this particular math equation or these two equations. The great thing about this, we hear a lot from customers that they want to have the chain of thought, understand what the model is doing and how it's thinking through things. And so this structured output example gives these nice various steps as the model is thinking through how it's solving this equation. One thing to call out too with this is sometimes the model may not choose to respond depending on what you are asking. And so there is a refusal aspect now, and we will return the refusal aspect to the user and let them know why it can't respond for the particular schema provided. There's a link to this actual implementation in the repository. We have two different samples similar to what Dimitri called out. This sample is the one I just showed here. So it's all here. You can copy and paste it and run the code, or this is showing a function calling example. So similar, if you want to run it with the pedantic model or not, you can uncomment the code and then work this into your application. The thing to call out is right here. We're just setting that class to the response format. Everything else is handled for you, all the parsing of the schema, unless you choose to pass in your own JSON schema. But pretty easy to get started. We'd love to have you try it out. Give us feedback, please, either in a discussion or an issue. And that's all I have.
Perfect. Thanks, Dimitri and Evan. I want to pause before we have one more topic before we'll get to open questions. But does anyone have any questions or any feedback or anything that they'd like to share around structured outputs? Hey, Gary, if you want to come off of me, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm just I'm curious because you're setting the types in the execution settings, but if you're doing it through a chat or multiple plugins or whatnot, how does that work with if each plugin or has a different schema?
So basically, in this case, when we set a response format in execution settings, we are not setting response format for plugin. We are setting it for actual response. And then for function calling and the schema for plugins, it's generated separately during the function calling process. And like it's been there a long time already. So it was implemented like a long time ago, and it's working like independently. But when we are setting response format with JSON schema, in execution settings, we are setting it for our final response. So basically, JSON schema for plugins and then JSON schema for response, they are, completely separate, basically.
Okay,
if that answers your question.
Okay, because when we're doing the .NET one anyway, I thought there was an option there to do it for function calling.
Yeah, so for function calling, basically the schema is already generated for you automatically by Semantic Kernel. So you just need to define a kernel function, and then Semantic Kernel will generate all of the schema, including the parameters, function description, a return result, and so on. But this specific functionality for structure outputs, it's related only to the final response. So you can, properly deserialize it and then work with it in your code.
Yes, I'm missing something. So let's say I have a plugin and I'm given it some description, and then I wanted to return some specific schema. I don't know how to do that today. I thought this was going to provide. I thought this feature is what I would use to do that. I understand function calling has does something to work out which function to call next, but when it actually calls an actual function and you've given it your prompt and you want it to return a specific schema out of that, how does that work, or is that just not a thing?
Yeah. So Sergey, you want to jump in?
Yep, it seems I can answer the question. So imagine that like you ask LLM about the weather in Boston, right? And you advertise two functions to LLM. One is get weather in Boston, and the other one get current time.
Right.
So what's going to happen? LLM as orchestrator is going to call two of your functions. First is going to call get current time in order to understand the current time. And the second function is going to call get current weather and pass the current time to the as an input for the current weather.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing LLM is going to do, LLM is going to summarize all the information it received from the second function and answer you. And that's where that thing comes into the play. So instead of giving you a text as a response, it will return you a JSON with a summary. So to sum everything up, so there will be two function calls. And then there will be third response from LLM, which will have JSON format with a summary in it, or with the other fields you describe in your JSON.
I guess that's the part I'm not getting. If there's an example or something, that'd be great, rather than me spending 20 minutes on it.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we can definitely, Gary, I can connect you with Sergey, and we can definitely follow up offline because I want to make sure that you get the clarity that you need. But would love to be able to just grab a couple more sections that we have and then get to open Q&A, but can definitely start a thread to follow up there.
Thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions on structured output before we go to one more announcement from our end? Okay, if not, we also have time during open Q&A if you think of other questions as well. Roger, do you want to go through some of the new announcements from Open AI and Azure OpenAI as well?
Yeah, sure. Let me jump in. Share my screen really quick. Yep. Can you see the screen?
Yep, we can.
Amazing. So the update is currently for a few hours ago, I would say Azure AI and OpenAI, they released their stable package. And the Azure AI package, not as before in the previous versions, the new stable version, they removed many of the preview features that were there in the preview packages. So features like Assistance API, audio capabilities, and such. So this brought us new ways of thinking about our strategy for versioning those two connectors and how we are going to move forward after they have the stable release. So I put this as an architecture decision record, as we are still discussing ways to move forward with this approach, as we are looking forward to not have a big impact and minimize, and as well as give a clear message moving forward how we are going to kind of work with the versions of the connectors moving forward. So it's just a really quick recap on how we are moving with this, and we are currently investigating and thinking coming to some good decision for this week for those connectors. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole message. And definitely we are coming with a good strategy that impacts the least, if none, of the customers as possible. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Any questions folks have? Okay, if not, we'll just go into open QA. Thanks, Roger. Really appreciate you sharing that out.
Yep.
Perfect. And now with this, we'll go ahead and move into any open questions or scenarios you may be going through that you want to discuss. Feel free to put it in chat. Would love to have you come off of mute. I see we have a hand up. Jeevan, do you want to come off of mute?
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. So, we've been trying to kind of, play around with semantic kernel with GPT-4o and images, right? And one of the things that we did see is that, the ability to kind of set the detail in the image content, that seems to be missing in semantic kernel. And we are using 1.18. Is there any plan? I'm not sure if it is, it is now an option in 1.21, but I just want to kind of hear from the team if that's, will be added sometime later, so that we can kind of control the, the fidelity and of the image, because the API supports it, right? But I don't think semantic kernel gives us the ability to kind of set that property.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Roger, with some of the connectors and images, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So we had an issue before on this exactly this question, and the good point is that I had to track on this issue how it is if it's already sorted. I don't have the clear resolution for that, but the thing was that most of the details is already decided by the model. So if you send an image with high quality, the details automatically is set for high quality. So the automatic behavior is the one that is taking place for those scenarios. But if you want to manually change that, I believe we are allowing this into the image modalities, but I have to double check our chat message how you are able to set that up. But yeah, that's something that I can take care of offline and keep track of it.
Sure, Roger. So how do I kind of keep this conversation? Do you want me to kind of put something in GitHub and
yeah, please,
and
please.
then yeah, and then kind of include you in the conversation, or just put in a Q&A there?
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
I can follow on that one. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, that'll be great.
Perfect. Thanks for the question, Jeevan. Other questions folks may have? Hey, Gary, if you want to come off mute, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm having some issues with tracking what is actually being sent to the LLM. So I was implementing, what is it, the filters, prompt filters, and that was working fine for the, so I'm using the chat API, the agent chat API, and that was working fine for the initial prompt, where I'm getting to select, for example, which agent I want to use. But then when it selects the agent and it starts to execute against those, it's like a black box to me. So I'm struggling to find out what the hook is, so that I can debug that in code to see what the actual prompt being sent to the LLM is. So if there's I don't think I found an example, because there's a number of different ways, I think, to hook into these things. So I'm finding that confusing. So is there a specific example that shows me how to hook into, for the chat agent version, how the function calling part, I guess, is being executed?
Yeah, hi Gary, Chris here. So thanks for your feedback on this stuff. I think you've helped to improve this space already. So I think I'm somewhat familiar with what you're talking about. So with the different strategy classes, if you remember, they take a prompt function and kernel, so which could be different from, is distinct from the kernel that might be passed to the agent. It's not always the same. It's not bound to the kernel that you've assigned to the agent. So in terms of, if you're setting filters on the agents and passing a different kernel to the selection strategy, then those filters won't be engaged. So, so number one, if you have filters enabled for the kernel that's associated with the strategy, like a prompt filter, that should work. It's just, I think, a matter of making sure it's on that kernel. And then, so I think to initialize the strategies, you're passing in the prompt function and the kernel, and so you should, you should be able to use that to gain visibility, just the way you described. So it sounds like you're not doing anything wrong, but your approach is right. So I think it's just a matter of digging in and verifying that how you're configuring this strategy is aligned with what you've described. And I'd be happy to take a look with you offline too.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Chris and Tal, would if Gary was using the open telemetry, would he be able to see all that in telemetry feeds also?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll paste a link in for you, Gary, of just how to get started with that.
Yeah, I was hoping not to have to go to the open telemetry because that adds a level of complexity, and it's not really the debugging; it's like an after the fact. But that if that's the only thing, then that's still useful. So I got go on.
Both are valid.
Yeah. So I had a follow up with regards to how because I can't see anything, it's a bit of a black box to me. How the function calling stuff works. So if I select, if I have a chat and I say something, and then I have a selector that says, okay, I want you to use these two agents, and then agent one gets executed and does some plugin stuff, and then executes, and then it returns a result. And let's say the termination strategy says, now go and execute my second agent. The second agent, it gets to see all the results of the first agent's response, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the strategy has access to the entire conversation history on every agent invocation. Depending now, if you're applying, so you can optionally apply a reducer to the strategy, and so sometimes for token management, I think that this was we made this update based on your input that you might not want to pass the entire history, so you might want to truncate down to the most recent messages, 1 or 2, 3 messages, or do a summarization.
Right.
And
but that's at sorry, that's at the that's the selection strategy part, right? But what I'm saying is, like, I've got my selection strategy. It's already picked, say, 2 agents. Then it executes those 2 agents without going back to the selection. I guess the selection strategy. So the selection strategy, let's say that we don't execute that again because we've already picked it from the last one, so it doesn't execute that again. So we're not setting the history in that respect, right? So we're not executing the selection strategy prompt again because we've already picked it from the last iteration. So what I'm getting at is when an agent finishes executing, that adds it to the history, I'm guessing, so that when the second iteration of so when we execute the second agent based on the initial prompt, it's going to get the full history, including the history that was just added by the previous agent. The reason I'm asking is because what I'm finding is that because I'm trying to execute multiple agents at once, 2 different agents, and they're repeating themselves, right? So I put in the prompt to say, don't repeat anything that the previous agent, one of the agents has just said, and yet it it literally almost spits out verbatim what one of the agents just said, because they serve similar but different purposes, if that makes sense.
Yep. So generally, the agents do have when they're being invoked, access to the entire conversation history, just like the strategy. So it's a different point of execution, but yes is the answer. My question to you is: are you using group chat or directly invoking the agents?
The group chat.
Then absolutely yes. The group chat will ensure that consistent history is available every time the agent's being passed. Although it sounds like there might be some specific dynamic that
yeah. So if I work out how to get the debugging of the individual agent calls, then I'll be able to see exactly what it is, and then it could just be a prompt issue on my end. It's just kind of weird because I keep saying don't repeat, and it keeps repeating, but it's just one of those things. So all right, that's if it is actually sending the full history, then that clears up that at least.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The other one, Gary, that's worked for me in the past is, you're right, for prompting, if you have 2 agents and they're trying to play the same role, you're going to get repeats because they both think it's their turn. One of the things that's worked for me, that's worked very well, is if you define each agent to have a specific role or job, and you tell them as part of the prompt, hey, you should only respond if the question is about your scope of work. So let's say I have a PM agent and a copywriter agent. If I clearly define in my prompt why each one's there and tell them both, they don't respond unless it's a question about your thing, that works very well too.
Yeah. So in our particular scenario, I actually do want them both to respond, but I want them to build on top of what has come before, right? So agent one gave some particular advice, and then agent two would say, is saying, agent one makes a good point, but you should also think about it in this way, because it has a different perspective on the same sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to achieve anyway. But yeah. If no one else has got any more questions, I just got one last one. When I was trying to build my strategy, and as I've mentioned, I'm trying to get multiple agents to return, I found that the function strategy, I think, is that the right? Function strategy one would not return a JSON array. So my prompt was returning an array, but when I got the response, it would only give me a single object.
Was that a string?
So you know how you're parsing the JSON as it comes back? That JSON apparently just didn't have. It only had one element. It didn't have the full array. So what I ended up doing was not using a function and just using a raw prompt to execute it, and then parsing that out, and that started working fine. So I don't know if that's a bug in the semantic kernel code, or it's just a bug in how function calling works with OpenAI. I don't know.
Maybe having the filters enabled will give some insight into what's happening with the prompt function. I'm glad you looped back to this. I did want to call out that the selection strategy pattern is kind of pinned to selecting a single agent.
Right.
So if you're returning two names, that might create unexpected result in terms of since two names won't match any single name, then it'll either throw or fall back to default logic. If you have the initial agent property defined, so
I was able to create a strategy that returned multiple agents for me. I get that to work just fine, but I just couldn't.
Sure, but I don't think
the functions.
Sure. I'm just I question if the group chat would be able to consume that output properly.
It seems to.
Okay.
I can show you offline if you're interested.
Yeah, I'd love to take a peek.
Perfect. Thanks for the question, Gary. Other questions folks may have. I see a lot of them have been answered in chat. Do keep them coming in chat as well, but we'd love to hear from individuals if you want to come off of mute. If you don't have questions as well, we'd love to just hear about if you're open to being shared publicly, what you're working on right now with Semantic Kernel as well. We'd love to hear from you.
I do have a follow-up question, if it's okay, Sophia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I know this is something that I kind of posted and kind of related to my earlier question, which is around, images, right? Images and streaming, right? So, today when we are using streaming, right, we don't have a good way to kind of calculate tokens. I believe that is a feature which is kind of coming in later on, right? Based on the response that I saw in the Q&A. But we are thinking of rolling out something in the interim. So wanted to kind of get some thought from your or community on if somebody has done that, right? And how they have kind of gone about doing that. And this is the scenario, right? It's streaming. We want to kind of keep track of how much tokens have been consumed. If it is purely text, it's easy, right? We can kind of, use something like sharp token to kind of, do that. But when it kind of, comes to images, or it kind of gets a little bit more trickier. So, just an open question, if there's somebody has got any recommendation, till the feature is rolled out on how to kind of go about that.
Yeah, so for and I'm probably, Tal, if you're on, you can probably jump in too. I know for the telemetry we talked about earlier, put a link to the blog post. For Python, you can get the streaming tokens back, and pop that into telemetry, so that way you don't have to guess. You can see exactly what the model tells you, how many tokens you're using. .NET, we're still working on that. That one's a little bit trickier. Tal, do you know for images, does that metadata come back also from the model? Or maybe even Evan for Python?
I don't know off the top of my head. Image metadata, I'm not even sure if it's counted as tokens. I will need to take a look at the documentation from OpenAI.
Yeah, because again, it's for us, it's mainly for tracking purposes, right? We want to know, per request when it's streaming, how many tokens have been kind of consumed, right? If it is non-streaming, yeah, definitely we get that as a part of the usage, saying that, hey, this is so much tokens have been consumed, right? And streaming has always been a challenge when it comes to text, but we found a way around it. But with images, it just becomes a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, right now, streaming token with OpenAI, you will see the text token usage from Semantic Kernel. We do track the token usage from the OpenAI streaming chat completion as well. But for images, I'm not quite sure how they count images as tokens.
It looks like I've found some documentation. You can give this a shot. It looks like it's just pixel sizes. So I'll paste it in here. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the direction that we were kind of going in, right? Based on the OpenAI pricing, right? Take the base64, calculate the the dimension of the image, and then use that calculator to calculate the cost. So directionally, at least from a design perspective, that is how we were planning to kind of approach it.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the question, June. Really appreciate it. So we have a hand up. Gary, do you want to come up from you?
Sure. Sorry for taking all the space. But I got a follow-up to the token question. Not so much about counting it, but I was looking at the AutoGen site the other day, and I noticed they had token compression. I wanted to know if that was something that you guys are looking into.
Mark or Vin, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can take this one. This is something that we have on our roadmap at the moment. But let me take a look at what they're doing, and I can maybe you could bring it up with the next community office hours, and we can talk a little bit more about it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Is it token compression or prompt compression?
Well, isn't it kind of the same thing?
So I mean, like it's a prompt compression in order to use less tokens, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have an example in our repository about possible techniques how to do that. I will try to find it and share it in the chat. I will take it.
Right, because they're using a Python library, LM Lingua. Probably pronounced that wrong. I think that's it, which I think uses a custom model, I think, to be able to compress it. But they're getting significant compression, but I don't know how well that works. I was just curious if you guys had any experience with that. That's all, because it seems to compress it like significantly. It looks unreadable to me, so I don't know how the LLMs understand it, but apparently it works.
Yeah, we try our best not to bring in third-party tools just from a risk and security standpoints into Semantic Kernel, since it's used across many different types of enterprises. And you're right, the other one, like you mentioned, is like we talked about earlier with observability, like super important for you to be able to troubleshoot, debug, see exactly what's happened, especially from an auditability standpoint. So that's one thing we'll look at too, to make sure it doesn't do anything where it changes prompts or changes your what you're sending over, because we've seen that in the past. We had a few techniques that did some of those things, and we got a lot of feedback from this community saying no, like if I write the prompt, I want it to be sent exactly how I write it, just from again from a testability and from a production maintenance standpoint.
I agree with all that, but that's would be an opt-in type thing. So I mean, yeah. All right, thanks.
Great, thanks, Gary. Other questions folks may have? I'm curious too, has anyone been trying out some of the newer features or trying out the process framework? Would love to hear from folks if you've been starting to test it out.
Must have missed the announcement for the process framework.
Got it. Yeah, I was at our last week office hours
I did miss
in that
last week.
reporting, and then there's some updated documentation as well. And so there's some other updates that were shared in chat. Ben was sharing that some of the samples will be coming, but was just curious if anyone had had a chance to look at it after the announcement. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Evan, for putting that in chat as well. Yes, we have about 15-ish minutes left. If there are other questions or other scenarios folks are going through, I'd love to hear from you. Great. Well, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and end office hours. I'll stay on for a minute here just to make sure there are no lingering questions, but just want to thank everyone for joining in today and for the Semantic Kernel team for coming in, presenting about some of the new features and diving into that as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.